In this video I'll show you how you can recreate this render inside of Blender. If you're interested in the 3D file of the whole scene, you can find it on xrpage.com. I'll leave the link down below in the description. Make sure to be on the world settings and not in the object settings, in the shader editor tab. I've used the strength at 0.3 for the background and also a gradient texture with a mapping node that has the rotation set to 90 on the y-axis. After I've used a mixed color node with a scale texture with the values that you can see on the screen. The B value is another mixed color that has for the factor, and for the B value voronoi texture that has the scale to 500, the randomness to 0.7 and is set to smooth f1. The A value of the second mixed shader is the same scale texture that I've used before. The only difference is that this time the altitude is set to 20,000. I've created the water just by scaling down a cube on the z-axis, and after I've pressed the S, Shift and Z. The material is created with a principal BSDF that has a mass grave texture with a scale to 210 and the details to 0.1, connected to a bump node that has a strength to 0.03 and a distance to 0.2. The mapping has the scale on the x-axis to 3. Now for creating the terrain, I've used an add-on called landscape, so is this one, enable it. Press Shift A, go on Mesh and select landscape. Now switch the operator preset to dunes, and here you can play with the noise size and make sure that the fall off is set to X and Y. After, go on edit mode, select all the faces and press unwrap. After, go to the shader editor. I've used this texture from ABSCG and I've mixed ambient occlusion with the base color with a mixed color set to multiply, the factor is at 1. After I've used a hue saturation value with the hue to 0.47 and displacement is set to 0.1. In order to create the trees, I've used a free add-on that doesn't work in Blender 4, and so I went on the Blender website and I've downloaded Blender 2.92. In my case, I've downloaded the Windows 64.zip. And this is the add-on, so I've changed it from master to Blender 28, and after I've downloaded the zip code. The installation is really simple. Go on edit, preferences, press install and click on the zip. Now make sure that it is actually enabled, and here is where you can find it, so it's kinda similar to the shader editor. Now I'll show you how I've created the main tree of the scene. So these are the nodes that I've used with the exact values, and that's how it looks in all the 3 dimensions. If you want, you can also delete the leaves because I've used a particle system. I'll show you later in the video how you can create it. Before converting to mesh the tree, it's really important that you add in the data properties at least 3 for the resolution of the bevel. After, press right click and convert to mesh. So select all these edges and press delete because, as you can see, the topology is not right. So now select these edges and press F on the keyboard in order to fill the blank space. I've used the Bark 012 from ABSCG. In order to apply it, select all the faces and press project from view from the camera. I've used the hue saturation value, the hue to 0.47, the saturation to 1.2 and the value to 0.3. For creating the leaves, I've used the sample lanes. The texture is the leaf set 004 from ABSCG. If you don't know how to apply it, just select a plane, go to edit mode and in the UV editor tab, move and scale the shape. I've mixed the ambient occlusion and the base color with a mixed color node set to multiply and, like before, the factor to 1. After, I've used the hue saturation value that has saturation to 1.1 and value to 0.4. I've used another mixed color, this time with this kind of dark green. The factor is set to 0.5. This is connected straight to the principal BSDF base color. I've also used a translucent BSDF with another shader node that goes to a mixed shader that has the factor 2.8. For the roughness, I've used another mixed color node with a factor 2.95 and a B value to black. Before applying the leaves to the tree, just make sure that the origin point is set here. Press Shift and right click to move the 3D cursor, and after go to Object, set Origin and Origin to 3D cursor. Now select all the leaves and create a new collection. You can do that just by pressing M on your keyboard. Go back to the tree and go in weight paint mode and start to draw. So the particle system is really easy to create. So click on Advanced and after in Render, set Collection and the collection that you've just created. In my case I've used the leaf. To make the weight paint work, just go on Vertex Group and select the group. In this way the leaves will be displayed only on the part that are red in the weight paint mode. If your tree looks like that now, is not a problem. I'll show you later in the lighting part of this tutorial how you can improve the illumination. The other trees created with the same add-on of the first one. I've just used 2 nodes this time. For creating the second one, change the length, the radius, and if you want, you can also play with the shape convexity. Also here I've used the weight paint mode with the particle system, but this time, as you can see from this image, I didn't use the leaf 004 from AmbientCG, but I've just scaled this plane, and with this color the roughness is set to 0. This little plant is the same one that I've used in this other tutorial, so if you're interested in the creation of it, you can watch the other video. For creating the rocks, go to Edit Preferences and search for Mesh Extra Object. Enable this add-on. So now, when you press Shift A, you have the rock generator option. After like 10 minutes that I was playing with the values, I end up with this combination that has deformation to 7, roughness to 1.3, and both detail level and display level to 4. After I will change the first and the second values of the displacement textures. Now press Convert to Mesh. Select all the faces and press Unwrap and Unwrap. Here you can also use Smart UV Project. I've used the Rock 012 from AmbientCG, and that's the node setup that I've used. So like before, I've mixed the ambient occlusion and the base color with the mixed colors to multiply with the factor 1. I've created the planet with this node setup that you can see right here. So there is a mixed shader that has as a factor a gradient texture connected to a color ramp, and for the mapping I've changed the rotation. This gradient texture gives the transparent effect. The first input of the mixed shader in fact is a transparent BSDF, and the second one is another mixed shader that has as a factor a mass grave texture with a scale to 5 and details to 15, connected to an RGB curves that has the 2 points up here. The first input of the second mix shader is our principal BSDF with this color. And the second input is another principal BSDF with mass grave texture, like before, scale to 5 and details to 15, but this time the dimension is set to 0.8, connected to the vector of the noise texture. The color of the noise texture is connected to a color ramp for the base color and to another color ramp for the roughness and for the bump node. The second part of the planet, that is this kind of atmosphere effect that I've made, is created with this texture right here. So also here there are 2 mixed shaders like before. The first mixed shader has as a factor the same gradient texture of the planet, and also there is a transparent BSDF. The second input is another mixed shader. The factor this time is a layer weight with a blend at 0.15 and a color ramp. This color ramp creates the effect of the lines inside the layer weight. Here there is another transparent BSDF. The second input of the mixed shader is this principal BSDF with this color. I've set the alpha to 0.2 and the color strength for the emission at 4. I've created the rings with this node setup right here. I've used a gradient texture, this time set to quadratic sphere. The location is set to -0.7 both on the x and on the y axis. That's because now I'll show you. I want that the quadratic sphere is right in the middle. As you can see, there is the white at the center and the black only on the edges. After I've used another color ramp, and that's how you can see is because I wanted to add some more loops. This node setup is the factor of a mixed color. This mixed color has for the A value. This other node setup that is made with 3 wave textures, and I've switched to rings and Z. The first and the second wave textures has 10 and 170 for the scale, and I've used it in both 0.7 for distortion. After there is a color ramp, followed by a mixed color set to multiply with a factor to 1. Keep in mind that also here I have changed the positioning of the mapping to -0.5. And that's for the same reason of the gradient texture. So with the multiply it looks like that, and because I wanted to add some imperfection in the loops, I've added another mixed color, this time is set to subtract. And here there is a wave texture with a scale to 25 and a distortion to 0. Another color ramp, and this is the effect. So now that is mixed with the gradient texture, the result is this one. And this mixed color is a factor of this mixed shader that has for the first shader another mixed shader with a transparent BSDF, and this principal BSDF that has metallic and roughness to 1, alpha to 0.8, and emission at 2 with this orange. The factor here is this noise texture to basically create this kind of imperfection between the rings. That's the effect of the noise texture. And the second value of this mixed shader is, as you can see, the transparent BSDF, like for the first mixed shader. For creating the buildings that you can see right on the background, I've took the idea from timelapse on YouTube from Osvaldo Pasillas. In my case, I've modeled them in a way that's more low poly because they're not my main object in the scene. I've added a cylinder of 8 vertices and I've rotated on the Z-axis of 22.5 degrees. After I've scaled it down and I've just selected all these edges, press Shift D, after press Separate Selection and right click Convert to Curve. Now in the Geometry tab add some depth, after press Shade Auto Smooth. After I've selected the 6 faces and I've pressed E, Shift and Z. Now for the other 2, I've pressed E, S and X. And after S and Y to scale them. I've pressed I in order to inset the faces. And E for extrude. So if you don't know how you can select a full loop, you can do that just by pressing Alt and left click. After I've pressed, in this case, E, Shift Z. After I've selected all these faces and I've pressed the right click and triangulate faces. Now press Shift D and Separate Selection. Here I've added the wireframe modifier. The glass material is made with a transparent BSDF and a gloss BSDF connect to a mixed shader. The wood is this one from MSCG. Now for the trees, I didn't use the 3D model because the buildings are in the background, so I don't need extra details. So I went on another Blender file and I've created this tree after I've set film and transparent. I've changed the default sky texture to dust to 10 and air near 1. After I set the camera to orthographic and I've just rendered the image. Now connect the image to the base color. After I've used a translucent BSDF, connect to another shader. And the last node is a mixed shader node that is set to 0.9. Put the plane in this position and start to duplicate it by pressing Shift D and rotating it. After, join all the objects. And now you can apply these two modifiers, the array and the symbol deform. The clouds are just scaled cubes, so the material is this one. At the start there is an object info with the random to the W value of the noise texture. The noise texture is set to 4D. After there is a texture coordinate, and the object is the first input of the vector, and the second input is the color of the noise texture. This node is the vector math node. After that, I've used a mapping node, and the location is set to -0.5, that's because the gradient texture is set to quadratic sphere, and that means that the gradient texture is the center of the cube. After that I've used a color ramp for a better defining and 2 RGB curves in order to regulate the intensity of the density and of the emission strength. The color is set to 1. The lighting is quite simple. I've used one area light for island, as you can see from the viewport. The settings are this one that you can see on the right of the screen. And I've also used a new feature of Blender 4. So go on the Object Properties tab, and here in the shading there is the light linking. The light will be effective only for the object that I drag and drop inside of this collection. I've done that also for the main tree. As you can see here there is a spotlight, and the only mesh that is active is the 3006. That's the comparison, so you can see on the left the tree with the spotlight and on the right the tree without the spotlight. Before rendering that, I've obviously used the cycles and the GPU compute. I've also changed the color management. I've set the look to medium high contrast, and in the compositing tab I've added a glare node that has the threshold to 4 and the size to 8. I've changed a little bit with the hue correct the yellows and the green, and after with the color balance I've used the value of the gain at 0.97. That's all for this video. I hope that you found it helpful. Subscribe for more and see you all in the next one.